Okay, so what I want y'all to realize is different today is that yesterday we only talked about the recursive formula, yes? So that's the one where you only have to plug in R. Now today we're going to talk about the explicit formula. Do y'all remember that is the one that you can type in your calculator and find the 100th term if you want to. Okay, so we haven't learned that for geometric, but we did learn it for arithmetic. So on this formula, I want you to see we have a sub 1 times r to the n minus, I almost listed that, n minus 1 power. Okay, I know, it was bad. Okay, so looking at this first example, what's my common ratio? What are we multiplying by? 3. How do I get from 2 to 6? It's times 3. And we could always test it. 6 divided by 2 is 3. And then if I do 6 times 3, did that give me my next number? Yes. So my common ratio is 3. So remember, in the recursive formula, we just plug in R. So A sub n equals R. What's my R? 3, bless you, times A sub n minus 1. Now, remember the recursive formula is always the one that has that n minus 1 at the bottom. And that's true for arithmetic and geometric. It's also telling us that we're multiplying by 3. Well, to find our next 3 terms, we can do 54 times 3, and that gives me 162. Times 3 gives me 486. And then times 3 gives me 1,458. Bless you. Okay, now the explicit formula is the new one today. So we're going to write A sub n. And then it says A sub 1. What does that mean? First term. What is my first term? 2 is number 7. I don't know why there's no number 1 through 6, but it is what it is. Okay, so our first term is 2 times, what's my R? 3, and then it's to the n minus 1 power. And now I'm going to put that in parentheses because to type it in your calculator, it has to be in parentheses. Okay? Now, we actually already found the 7th term. Do y'all see that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we know the 7th term. But what if I asked you for the 12th term? We're going to put it in the calculator. So we're going to type it. And it's, remember, the A sub n turns into y. And then the n turns into x. That wasn't very noticeable. This turns into y when we type it in our calculator. And then this turns into x. So y equals 2 times 3 to the power. Now watch what happens if I try to type x minus 1 without parentheses. Do you see how that minus 1 is not up there? So watch what happens when I do use parentheses. Do you see how it stayed up top? That's why we have to use parentheses. So I'm just going to write them because we have to use them. Okay, so if I want the 12th, remember we click the cogwheel, table, and we're going to type 12. So we get this big old number, 354, 294. Okay, so knowing that, I want y'all to try the next one. I'm going to write here fast. While we're trying the next one. Okay, what's my common ratio? -2. Okay, so my common ratio is -2. And what do you notice about your numbers?
They flip.
Yeah, they flip. Positive, negative, positive, negative. And it's because a negative times a negative is a positive, and then times a negative gives it negative. So that's why it goes back and forth. So if it ever goes back and forth like that, it's pretty much telling you it's geometric. Okay, recursive formula, again, we just plug in R. So a sub n equals r, which is negative 2, times a sub n minus 1. Now, with negatives, especially when it's every other term like this, we have to be careful in the calculator, so I'm going to show you that in a second. But to find our next term, what comes after 40? Negative 80. Then what? Positive 160. Then what? Negative 320. Good job. So my explicit formula is a sub n. What's my first term? Negative 5 times, what's my r? To the n minus 1. Now, I'm going to use parentheses when we type it in because negatives will be handled differently if we don't use parentheses. Okay? Also, do y'all notice the graph is exponential? It's not linear. Okay, so cogwheel table, and it worked. So we're looking for the 11th term, which is negative 5,120. Now watch what happens if I type it without parentheses. Oh, that's not what I meant to do. Dang it. Let's start over. Okay, do you see how when I open the table, it doesn't do every other negative? It's because the two negatives are canceling each other beforehand, so be careful with that. When you have negatives, use parentheses. Or pay attention to your table. Does this match my sequence? Positive 5, positive 10? No, so that's where I know there's a mistake. Make sure you use those parentheses. Okay, the next one. What do you notice is missing in the equation? The first number, which is my first term, right? This is telling me r equals 3 because our r is what has the exponent. What do you think? What number could we plug in there to be your first term that wouldn't change anything multiplying? 1. If I rewrote this as a sub n equals 1 times 3 to the n minus 1, does that change? If you multiply by 1, does it change anything? No, that's why it's without the 1, but that's what your a sub 1 would be 1 if there's nothing there. So we're going to type that equation in. Remember, when we type it in, we change this to y, this to x. And we're going to do a table because it wants my first 3 terms. Where do sequences start? At 1. So we're going to erase the 0, the negative 1, and the negative 2. And I get my first 3 terms here, so 1, 3, and 9. And then my 11th term is 59,049. Any questions with how we did that? So I want you to try the next one on the back. Type your equation in. So you're trying this one. The star, y'all, is just multiplication. Don't let that throw you off. It's just multiply. So you would type it just like normal. Okay, while y'all are still typing, that's fine. What's my first term looking at this equation? Is it negative 4 or 2? Negative 4. First term first. Okay, and then what is my r? 2. Good job. So I know I should have a negative 4 first. What came after negative 4? Negative 8. Then what? Negative 16. And what was our 14th number? 768. Yeah, that. Did I do it right? And we could even look at it again. We erase these. Ooh, what did I do? And then if I type 14, there's our answer. Any questions with those? Pretty simple. Okay, we're almost done. Okay, here, it only gives me my first term and my R. Is that enough information? Yeah, isn't that enough information to plug it into our recursive formula? Okay, this should say common ratio, by the way. So, that should say common ratio. And then, just a reminder, recursive formula is A sub n equals R times A sub n minus 1. We just don't have it typed on the back, so I'm writing it. An explicit formula is A sub n equals A sub 1 times R to the n minus 1 power. Okay, and remember, for this formula, we have to replace R. And for this formula, we have to replace A sub 1 and R. So for the recursive, A sub n equals, what's my R here? 5. It tells me, times A sub n minus 1. And I'm not even going to come up with the first 5 terms by myself. I know my first term is what? It's 4, it tells me. So I'm going to go ahead and plug in the explicit formula. So A sub n equals, what's my A sub 1? What's my first term? 4 times my R to the n minus 1 power. And I'm going to type it in. So y equals 4 times 5 to the x minus 1 power. Cogwheel table. I'm making it do the work for me, especially if I have to figure it out. Okay, did it work? Is my first term 4? Yeah, and then we have 20, 100, 500, and 2500. Okay, I want you all to try the next one. Ready to go? Not yet. Try this one. Plug in your equations. Okay, wait. Just plug in your equations right now. Just plug in the equations like this one and this one. You can do that. Okay, I have my 2 formulas on the board. That is what yours should look like. And there are our first 5 terms. So 2, is that what it told me my first term should be? Yes. 2, 12, 72. 432. Oh, one other thing I want to talk about. If it gives me A sub n equals just some random number, doesn't matter, and it's asking you what's A sub n minus 1, what does that mean? Do you remember what that means? It means the one before. It means your previous term, or term before. Good job, y'all. So, like, you would go backwards. So, if you had 2 numbers, this number would go here, and it wants to know this one. This would be A sub n minus 1 if this is A sub n. So, it wants to know the term before.